before we even kind of get into the activity around it. Now, we warned you last week, we warned you guys, this is going to be a John Wooden style training session where, John Wooden had these all-American athletes. You guys are in real estate. And John Wooden, at every single practice, maybe he's too old for some of the people on this call, but he was a really famous college basketball coach. He would teach, West, go blue. He would teach these all-American athletes, right, how to put their socks on. Last time I was taught how to put my socks on was when I think I was 2 or 3. It was at least, I don't even remember it, but I'm pretty sure my mom has. No one's taught me. Still, West, go blue. I don't care. Still, I haven't been taught how to put my socks on since I was 3. So imagine what it's like being recruited as a heavily recruited All-American going to, I believe, UCLA, right? One of the top basketball programs in the country at the time. And now this Hall of Fame college basketball coach is taking the first hour of your day teaching you how to put your socks on. Because why? He taught the sock lesson because what would happen, in his opinion, if, let's say you didn't know how to put your socks on properly. And remember, this is probably Chuck Taylor era. So, I think all of us on this call are maybe not Noah, but I think everyone else might be old enough to remember Chuck Taylor's, right? A little bit different than the modern basketball shoe from a breathability perspective, right? So in the Chuck Taylor era with these like canvas sneakers, wasn't it much more important to have your socks on properly? Because if your shoes weren't breathing, you don't get as much airflow. What's the propensity? You can get blisters a lot more easily than you could on like the new fancy shoes and stuff like that. And what happens if your top player gets a blister in the first half of one of your biggest games of the season? And maybe your top player wouldn't have gotten that blister in one of the biggest games of the season had the coach taken the opportunity to teach the guy how to put on socks properly at the first practice. So as ridiculous as it is, we're going to talk about how to put on our socks. Today is sock day. Congratulations. Right? Today is dribble day. Today is sock day. Today is 1 foot putts, Wes. I don't know, whatever the golf equivalent is, because I didn't do it enough, whatever it was, that's today. So as ridiculous as this sounds, there are 3 principles that we really need to understand before we block a single hour out of our calendar. And we're going to go through and build your session. This is how slow we're going to take it because we really need to understand the fundamentals. We're going to build your session. We're going to build your schedule in the next session. So today is not about putting together a time block schedule. Today is simply just the principles of it. So the first thing is, if we're going to build out a proper schedule in real estate, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we're applying the most amount of energy to the highest value thing. So, there are a lot of different ways this has been said over the course of history. And so I'm just going to frame this in a couple different ways that we might have heard it. Have you guys ever heard of I think it's called the Pareto ratio, Pareto rule, right? Pareto rule. You guys ever heard of this? The Pareto rule, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's 80% of the people do 20% of the people do 80% of the work. In a group setting, right? If you have a group of people, 20% of the people will do 80% of the work. Just group dynamics. Similarly, if you look at your database, 20% of your sphere will give you 80% of your deals. Let's just think about the people that we know in our lives. Without even doing the math, I think it'd be really easy to say it's at a minimum. If we had half of the people that we could call that would actually help our business, think about all of the contacts that you've made over the course of your career. Isn't it about half? It's less than half that seem genuinely interested in helping you out. Most of the people, they'll pick up and tell you what's going on if you call them at the right time. But does everyone you talk to end up being an advocate for you? No. If you look at your sphere, only 20% of your sphere will be advocates, even though you think it should be 100. Because we're saying sphere is know, like, and trust, and you can trust. So if there's mutual know, like, and trust, shouldn't everyone be helping each other out? At the end of the day, it's not how it works. So if you have a database of 100 people, you should really expect only 20 people to be helping you, your VVIPs. So if I already knew that only 20 people were going to help me, would I, in theory, even waste time on my other 80%? I might, but I'm going to take it a lot less seriously than my 20%, which is feeding my business, right? Steve Jobs had a famous phrase for this. He called it his signal to noise ratio. So for Steve Jobs, he called the signal the 2 or 3 most important things that he had to do on any given day. The noise is everything else. And I don't know what Steve Jobs' day looked like, but I imagine those 2 or 3 things were probably really important, right? He measured success by the amount of time in his day that he spent working on signal versus the amount of time that he spent in his day working on noise. And for Steve Jobs, if his 2 or 3 most important things took up 50% of his working hours, it was a successful day. So if you think about it, if your 2 or 3 most important things in your day took up 4 hours, that's a good day. How often are we lead genning for 2, let alone 4 hours of our day? The second thing we're going to think about is we're going to batch everything. So it doesn't make sense for us to go to, texting Freddie back about the question that he had, to try and negotiate a deal with Noah, to then jumping on a listing presentation for Wes, and go, if I'm always, because your brain, as much as we like to think that we can multitask as humans, and since we're all men on this call right now, I can say that we all, look, guys, this is nothing about this. I know that we can all multitask. We can all talk to our girlfriends and significant others while we're watching golf and checking our phones and all of our sports betting and also checking out our work. I know that we can do that on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm talking like Monday through Friday. So for the most part, humans are awful at multitasking. We can pick up on signals, right? Which is why if we can have noise in the background, obviously the golf is what I'm referring to. Our significant other are never the noise, they're the signal, right? So we can have noise in the background. We have all this other stuff happening. We can get it because we're really good at sensing things. But in terms of actually putting in time and effort and moving things forward, we're really bad at shifting from one thing to another. Our brains have to physically reset. And that reset time eats into our productivity. So it's a lot more effective for us as humans to actually do things all at one time. If you're going to do admin things, do an hour. Just do all your admin things. If you're going to do lead gen, do all your lead gen. If you're going to write handwritten notes, write notes, because you get in a routine. And it's that routine and that habit that helps you move faster. And so when we're talking about, look, we're not talking about a lot of time. If we could squeeze an extra hour of productivity out of our days, aren't we increasing our business by at least 12 or 15% just by doing that? So if we can be more efficient in how we move from task to task to task, in the course of all the tasks that we do in any given day, maybe it saves us an hour of productivity. Aren't we already growing our businesses by 12 or 15%? And if you're doing $3 million in commission a year, and we grow you by 12 or 15%, I believe Blue Pebble has already paid our cost of admission at that point, right? So this is how important this is. Additionally, we're going to build in a reset. A lot of people will say this is grounding, but and I'll admit this. I tend to be a 7 a.m. to midnight kind of guy, and anyone who's ever seen an email from me at 11 o'clock would know this, Noah included, right? But the reason why you can do that is because I take breaks throughout the day. I go really hard for a few hours, and I take like a half-hour break. My dog, hang out, maybe watch a little bit of TV, catch up on the news, whatever. And then I go really hard for another few hours and do the same thing. And then I go really hard. Okay. So by building in that little reset, that mental reset, you can actually really recharge yourself pretty well. Go grab a coffee at 1 o'clock. Go hit some balls, right? I mean, just go take a break, re-energize yourself, ground yourself, and you'll find that you have a lot more efficiency after that break. So now that we understand kind of how the most important principles around constructing a schedule, this is one thing that is just incredible when you think about it. We're going to go through an exercise of thinking about, how much time you actually have as a real estate agent, because it's incredible. If you talk to people on a recruiting call, it's always like, oh, I just don't know where I have the time. Well, tell me about your day. Are you making 20 contacts a day? No. Are you previewing houses every day? No, not really. Are you having networking coffees every day? No. Well, what are you doing? Well, I don't have the time. I'm busy. With what? So let's talk about how much time we have in the day. So look, how many real estate agents would basically give their left or mortgage officers, both apply? How many of us would basically give both of our arms to only work a 4-day week? No calls Saturday, Sunday, and pick one day off during the week that you don't have to think about it. Wouldn't that be awesome? For most real estate people, real estate's a 7-day gig, right? If days off a week, okay, you have 252 business days a year, and that also includes 2 weeks of vacation. So you might not have known this, but at your former corporate jobs, most employees in the United States who work a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, they work 252 business days a year. When accounting for federal holidays and vacation, how many hours per day do you have to work? This number could vary. Look, we all have other commitments. Part of the reason why we chose real estate is we wanted a flexible schedule so we could handle those commitments. But what if we spent half time, 4 hours a day for 252 days a year? How many hours is that? 1,000 hours? What if we spent 1,000 hours making contacts? What if we spent 1,000 hours doing open houses? What if we spent 1,000 hours networking with people and getting introductions to new people? All I'm saying is like, whatever time you have, it's more about the discipline with that time than the amount of time that you have. There are stories, and we know these people, real estate agents that close 20 or 30 transactions a year while working another job. There are stories about that. They have systems, okay? And the point here is that those people who work part-time schedules who really want to make it in real estate, they tend to be laser focused when it's real estate time because they know that they've got these commitments on their 9 to 5 and they can't let that go because otherwise they lose their financial security. They've also got commitments outside that, family, life, whatever. So they know that when they've got 2 or 3 hours of real estate time, what is that? That's my 2 or 3 hours to build my legacy. So those part-time people, I bet you, they're spending, those people that really want it, they're spending more effort and being more productive in those 2 or 3 hours of focused productivity versus what a lot of full-time agents are doing on 8-hour schedules because they're only focused on doing the right things all the time. So if we're feeling like not making progress and we don't have enough time, part of what we need to do is think about like, we need to do an audit, right? Like look back on your schedule, get down into 15-minute increments. What are you doing? And it's not cutting, you don't cut the things that make the biggest impact. We need to cut the things that have the lowest return on our investment or the lowest return on our time. And sometimes that's doing the thing that is most uncomfortable, like making phone calls. And by the way, it only seems uncomfortable because Brian Avery just signed on to this thing and was so jazzed about all of his great conversations. It only seems uncomfortable. So this is a little bit of feedback from Nate, and I keep picking on Nate in these slides. I got to tell Claude to stop doing that. But we actually pulled a lot of these slides from our training over the last year, which is great. So now they're going to pop up all over these things. But really, at the end of the day, I think when you think about blocking, if you have a calendar, right, which is just blank, and you wake up every day and you're just going to fill this with whatever you think is on your plan, your estimation of what it actually takes to do things is always off. I'm forgetting the rule, but there's a rule where basically like, if you set aside too much time for a task, you will basically take that amount of time to do the task. So like, let's say I told myself, hey, Brian, I'm going to write you a handwritten note. I've got an hour to do it. Psychologically, I'm not right now and write you the handwritten note. If I was, if I'm strong that I am, I would probably write you the handwritten note right now. And then I go off and hit balls for the next 50 minutes. Right. But like what typically happens in this case is people take an hour to write the handwritten note. I'll do that in half an hour. I'm going to go. And so what time blocking starts to allow you to do is frankly pack in more activity into your time because it forces you to consolidate your activities into certain blocks. So while month 1, without a time block schedule, you might only be operating at 30% efficiency. Hey, no, Warner, just curious for you. You can also tell me I'm wrong. It's totally okay. I promise. Okay. When you started calling expires, did you have that on your calendar?
When I first started, no.
When you made the change to go from not time block calling to time block calling, what happened to your contact rate per day?
It went up significantly.
Didn't it like double?
About that, yeah.
The only difference here, same dialer, same thing. The only difference is literally putting 2-hour time block on his schedule so no one knew he had to finish all those contacts with expires in this 2-hour block. Versus having it wide open on his calendar, he can go back and check it whenever he wants. Hey, Wes, I'm open all day. I'm actually going to go back and take a nap. I'll get back on my expires later. But there's other stuff that we can do. So if we can time block and force ourselves into these smaller and smaller buckets so we can add more and more buckets to our day, you're going to notice a massive increase in your productivity.